Hey everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism. Today we're going to talk about other narcissistic parents in your world. Now, any of you who has children, and this could be babies up to teens, you may not even have a narcissistic partner. And in fact, may have run into some of these toxic patterns for the first time in the parents of your children's friends. Yeah, if you have any of that happening, drop that in the comments, right? We have talked about just about every variation of the many narcissistic relationships out there: partners, family, friends, coworkers. But what about other parents? This is a thing. You do not really choose your children's friends. You may try, but they meet kids at school and whatever, and you certainly don't choose their parents, right? As a result, you may find yourself in a situation where you are attempting to negotiate play dates, boundaries, and other potentially difficult issues with an entitled, arrogant, controlling person who just happens to be the parent of your child's best friend. It's interesting. This issue initially came up in an Am I the Asshole that we had covered, in which a mother shamed another mother, where there was some sort of last minute play date, and the entitled mother's child was a fussy eater. And then the woman who was confused about whether or not she was the problem, and she was confused by the entitled mother's behavior. The entitled mother noted that this other mother cooked ethnic food that the entitled mother's child would not eat. And then so she made the child some chicken nuggets, which the child ended up enjoying. It's a good strategy. But the entitled parent not only criticized the parent who provided dinner for her child, saying, "You didn't cook him a fresh meal," whatever that means, but then went on to accuse her of being an abusive parent. My verdict is that not only is that woman not the asshole, sadly, the friendship between the children really can't move forward as long as the mothers had to organize their playtime. Like, there's just no way that that woman who's just trying to cook some chicken nuggets was getting called out. Now, once upon a time, and in the world I grew up in, our doors were cast open, we ran outside, and in the summer, we didn't even go back inside until the light began to fade. We just played outside a lot, and we didn't come in until it was dinner time. There were no engineered play dates, no enhancements, no fancy summer camps or activities. Those boring and bullied summers were actually rather character shaping for me and for other kids, because we learned to entertain ourselves and just sort of figure it out. Something I actually think that I'm still really good at is entertaining myself. Now, in this new era of curated childhoods and micromanaged bubble wrap children, and also, unfortunately, and I'm aware of this, in an era where it simply may not be safe for children to play outside alone. I happen to raise my kids in a big city, so that simply wasn't an option for them to go running into the street. Parents do have to be more active agents in their children's lives, and that, unfortunately, means coordinating with other parents. It can get real messy really fast. And once you meet one of these other difficult parents, you may recognize that you would never have chosen this person as a friend, or even as an acquaintance, or even someone you wanted to be seated next to on an airplane, right? It's just the hand of fate and bad luck that your child chose to become friends with a child whose parent is a jerk. And there's a few ways that this can play out, right? In a few areas. So, number one is screen time. Like, once again, I got lucky. My kids just missed the worst wave of screen time, as it's called, right? Seeping into early childhood. But it is now the way parents can shame each other. "Oh, my little Johnny only has 10 minutes of screens a day." Well, maybe leaving out that little Johnny has a full-time nanny whose job is to keep him entertained and away from the devices. Obviously, sitting in front of a device 12 hours a day is not optimal. But that said, there are parents out there who literally pride themselves on this whole restricted screen time thing. It's sort of the 7-year-old parent equivalent of smugly saying that your child is going to Harvard, right? No screens for us. The challenge is that if you have this smug parent's child over and are trying to get real life stuff done, a load of laundry or get the dinner ready or whatever, and you're letting the friends have video game time or tablet time, those parents will likely berate you for putting precious Johnny's eyes in front of a screen. If your child values this friendship, then maybe more of these play dates have to be at the other person's house. The shaming is the worst part because it is as though the assumption is that you're raising your child in a bordello because you let them play a video game so you could get dinner on the table. Now, I know some of you watching this may not agree, but I got to tell you, my kids are grown and I've seen enough well adjusted kids who watched a hell of a lot of TikTok or played video games who are actually growing up into rather productive citizens. There are other factors that matter. So, this zealotry around the devices is sort of lost on me. And it often seems like a control or shaming move when it is foisted on other parents, something that difficult controlling parents often do. Number two is that space of food. Oh my goodness. This is a big one for the narcissistic and entitled parents. I mean, most likely it's a manifestation of control and maybe in some cases superficiality because it really doesn't sit well with a narcissistic parent if they have a child who doesn't look exactly the way that they want, right? So whether it's restrictions around sugar or a prohibition around fast food, I got to share this story because it's just so good. I remember watching a sort of potluck type children's event, and a poor woman who's very busy, she got assigned to bring a particular type of hamburger, but she wasn't able to get the restaurant that they asked for the hamburgers from to make enough of them in time for the lunchtime sort of potluck time. So this mother had to go with a different type of fast food burger, which when the kids saw her coming with the bags, they were thrilled. They're like, woo! It's one day, right? Again, oh my goodness, that what happened. A particularly entitled, controlling mother saw this woman rushing in to drop the burgers, and she had a literal meltdown. She screamed, literally screamed, full volume. How could you? How could you show this to my child? What if my child ate it? I have to say, all of this was like narcissism porn for me. I couldn't look away. I just sat down and watched it. And I had someplace else to be. But this woman lost it. To the credit of the woman who brought the burgers, she said to the dysregulated mother, throw them out. And I did. And she did. She threw them out, right? And she just walked away. I felt her. And I thought, wow, that was the way to play it. Just throw them out and walk away. But the narcissistic woman couldn't let it go. The damn burgers were in the trash, by the way. And she just kept screaming long after the burger wielding mother left. My guess is that these two women's children were no longer getting together. I remember those days of having kids and navigating these waters, and I could sniff out the difficult parents. When I did have their kids over, I would order in and ask the parent to make very clear what their requests were, dietary restrictions, allergies, the whole nine yards. I'm not a good cook. And it was just easier so that these controlling parents could make their precious choices known. And overall, I just wanted to have as little as possible to do with these difficult parents. So it was easier to do it that way. A third place where these difficult parents really show up is one-upsmanship, or maybe it's one-up personship. Anyhow, but narcissistic parents are really competitive. And many interactions with them can feel like baiting. Oh, did you already apply for summer camp? Or what prep course are they taking? Or did you already do your back to school shopping? No, bitch, I didn't. Clearly, I did not. And whether it is the sports or the clothes or the school or the grades or the vacations, whatever it is a competition. Again, it may simply be baiting. So when they go at you, the clean play is to either say no without the expletive, or yes, or whatever it is, and then extract yourself from the conversation. They are asking the question because their stuff sorted out and they want to kind of get in their mini gloat. Parenting and shaming are so conflated and first world problem type people. People, I have to say, people who are living closer to the bone and maybe struggling more financially have much bigger problems and much different fish to fry where their children are concerned. But no matter how much or how little you have, shaming by entitled parents is a thing and it hurts. If your child values the competitive parent's child, you don't want to cut that friendship, obviously, but you can try to avoid the parent. Or you can just answer their questions succinctly and don't engage, or better yet, when they ask you, answer, but don't ask them if they have it all figured out. Then they don't get to show off. This entire dynamic is meant to generate self-doubt by insecure parents and other insecure parents. And most people want to do right by their kids. So they'll wonder if they're screwing up their kid. No, you're not. Nobody ever became a better human being just because they went to summer camp. The fourth kind of issue here is the elitist parent. And this is, to me, particularly atrocious. If your child is genuinely friends with a child, but you are a parent who doesn't bring adequate narcissistic supply or cachet or fanciness or whatever it is the narcissistic parent wants, you may find your children on the outside looking in. And in your own children, this can raise feelings of sadness, loss, and otherness, and confusion in your child. For example, that difficult parent invites other children whose parents they like better and they leave yours out. The elitist parent likely lacks empathy, so they don't care if they're hurting their child or your child by not inviting them. It's all about how it looks and what works for them. This may require careful and compassionate communication with your child, where you have to be very careful that you don't castigate and criticize the other parent much as you want to. But you also can let your child know that you are more than happy to create time together with their friend at some other time. As the children get older, these things may fade as an issue, but can really leave younger children wounded simply thanks to an insensitive parent. And you can give that exclusionary parent some stink eye the next time you see them. Just make sure the kids aren't around. The fifth issue to keep in mind is whether there's the presence of another narcissistic parent. So sometimes the main parent, the one that's doing all the play date arranging, they're not the one who's the issue, but they may be in a relationship to or married with to a narcissist, a ragey narcissistic parent at home who doesn't like noise or a mess, or really frankly probably don't like children. And they let everyone know it. Think twice before having your child play in that kind of setting. Again, all these stories are coming back to me. I recall my kids being at one kid's house, and this poor child was wound up as tense as a top. And my curious and rather messy children wanted to take out a game at her house, and I happened to be sitting there watching. And the poor child was so upset because she said, "When you take the game out, make sure no dust falls down or my dad will get mad." I was so sad, and I offered immediately, say, "Hey, how about we get to the park and go to the park?" And I got them the hell out of that obsessive space that I knew that poor child had to grow up in. Number 6 is to keep in mind that if it's someone in your family system, this may be the parent of your nieces or nephews or other children in your family system. So you adore the children, but their parent may be your very own narcissistic sibling or in-law. Same rules, same issues. And it's important to not punish the children for having these difficult parents. You know that after all these years, it has been a parenting pissing contest with them. Don't take their bait. Don't let yourself be triangulated. And as much as you can, keep it about the kids. No matter how aggravating and atrocious and competitive and obsessive parenting makes family occasions, make it about the kids. Distance yourself from the parents. I raised kids and in some pretty treacherous, difficult parent waters. I have been criticized for giving children sugar, unhealthy dinners, being asked to order more expensive menu items for their precious children, had my children excluded from events and parties, and even be told once to my face that I was messing up my kids by not being a hot lunch parent. I had that funny little thing called work I had to go to. I have witnessed that these parents who were unempathic, entitled, arrogant, competitive, dysregulated, controlling, mistrustful, and they were just plain mean. So it's a tough one, right? As I watch parents and even myself when I had younger kids. I would get angry about these parents, but then sadness often overtakes us, right? These poor children actually have to endure these parents. These were children who, as they become older, would often manifest anxiety, entitlement, or be obsessive in their zeal to succeed and terrified of their parents' rage if they didn't. In the more extreme cases, having these kinds of toxic parents, you'd see these kids evolve into substance use, disordered eating, body image distortion, and over time, the children being raised by these entitled parents are in a no-win situation. They are either anxious from having such a difficult parent, or they model their toxic parents' entitled behavior. I am always impressed when I see the unicorns emerge from these difficult parents and figure out those really great kids that come from these really tough parents, good temperament or some divine providence, who knows? But if the child's behavior morphs and becomes more difficult as your child grows up with this other child, you might see your own child distance from a child who's behaving more entitled. Now, we cannot hold, though, these children responsible for their parents' awful conduct. We just can't. And if anything, to have empathy for these children and perhaps try and create circumstances that are more relaxed and relaxing when they play with your child. But that said, also monitor these situations to ensure that they are not unhealthy for your child. Exposure to narcissism and entitlement and all the rest of it is not good for any of us. These parents do not need to be your friends. We can be kind to their children. We must be kind to their children. But if the rules, the control, and the shaming and all of it get to be too much, sadly, your child may need to be content with their time spent with their friend in school or in other arenas with this child. I know this is a tricky area, and some of you may think, well, I'm very careful about what my children eat. It's not about being careful about what your children eat. I think that's great. I think all kids in the United States and the world need to be eating healthy. It's how that gets expressed to other people. That can be made known, and understanding that everything in moderation, that while we focus so much on keeping the screens away, getting the healthy food in, what we often don't do is think about, is this child getting healthy behavior modeled for them? We're so worried about them eating broccoli and green beans that they were not careful enough about whether they're getting a steady diet of empathy and compassion. And the challenge is, in an increasingly competitive world, we're seeing increasingly competitive and entitled parents. Lots of narcissistic folks have kids. And unfortunately, when your child becomes friends with those kids, sweet as those kids may be, you once again have some real toxic people you're having to deal with that you definitely were not the one who chose these folks to be in your life. So it's tricky and it's messy, but those of you dealing with other parents who have narcissistic personalities, you get this. It's all about boundaries and recognizing that at some point your kid's going to grow up and they're not going to need you to set up their play dates anymore. Thanks again.